Welcome to On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by Review Maxer.
Hello and welcome to On Top of PR. I'm your host, Jason Mudd with Axia Public Relations. And today we're joined by my friend, Alfredo Garcia, who is with Sight and Sound Productions. Alfredo, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jason, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad you're here as well. Real quick for our audience, Alfredo Garcia is the Vice President of Sales for Sight and Sound and Mugwup Productions. He started his journey with the company as a marketing intern, where he discovered his passion for audio-visual production side of the business. He serves as a member of the executive leadership team and played a pivotal role in the company's growth from a small team of 15 employees to what the company is today, which is more than 50 employees. So Alfredo, welcome to the show. I'm having you here as a guest because you have been in the Sight and Sound production business and event planning business for 20 years now. I remember meeting you when you were a student, eager to break through in the profession. That just makes me feel old if I'm being candid. But today we have a unique opportunity, I think, to kind of talk about best practices for event planning in public relations for our audience of PR pros and helping them stay on top of PR. Alfredo, what kind of inspired this conversation is I know that your company and my company connected recently to produce a potential news conference. And that really got me thinking about this idea of, a couple of thoughts. One is a news conference dead? Is that still something people are actively doing? And if so, how do you do it best? And we'll get to that in a minute. And then the other question I think is, I was recently speaking in front of a audience of university professors and instructors. And I kind of said, I don't think the event management is a function that should be integrated within the communication and or public relations school within universities. And so people were kind of, a little bit surprised to hear me say that. But my recommendation was that event management is its own unique profession. And while people who have worked in PR and marketing can do that and be very successful with it, and a lot of events do require PR and marketing support, I do sense that that's a discipline that in my mind should fall more under the hospitality school or department. I want to hear your opinion on that in a minute, but I think what is interesting for our audience is going to be us helping them discover and discuss best practices for producing events, whether they're media events, public events, etc. Because I do sense that PR pros need to be mindful about producing first-class events or helping their team produce first-class events by pointing them to the right resource. At our agency, if a company ever comes to us and wants to produce an event, we say, hey, we'd love to help you promote the event, drive visibility and attendance and media coverage for the event. But if you need us involved in producing the event, we're going to point you in the direction of an event planning company, much like your organization, Sight and Sound Productions. So to set up the table, that's what I've got in store for our audience today. Does that sound like an interesting conversation to you?
Oh, definitely. Loved it.
Awesome. All right. So let's jump right in and talk about kind of best practices for events. Alfredo, kind of give me a description of like your process and your recommendations, thinking about the employed leader within an organization who, is doing either PR, marketing, or communications, and it's, let's say an executive comes to them and says, hey, I've got a great idea. We should do an event. If you were that person, Alfredo, what would be your response and what kind of questions might you ask them?
Well, thank you, Jason, again, for having us here. And again, media events are important. And for the most part, when we're called in, I hate to use the word staged, but really that's what it is. There is pre-planning that takes place in putting on an event that we get called in for. And so we get the phone call just as if you've called me or other companies call us, and we'll get that call from a PR person usually saying, hey, my boss just asked me, we're going to have some sort of dedication, or hey, we need to get this information out. Normally we're called in is because there's a live audience involved. And so we're there to support not only the news media that could be coming to taping things or from a virtual perspective, but also because there is dignitary or people in person that need to be there. And they could be tied to photo ops or several other entities. But that is the primary reason we get called in. my first question is always the same, no matter what type of a media event it is. And that is, why are we doing this event? Why are we spending your money? Why are we pulling in resources? And what is the purpose and outcome we're trying to get out of this event? I mean, step one is there. If they can't define that for me and the understanding of the reason why they want to host this event, then we kind of have to start from square one. Okay, well, really, what are we doing? Most of the time they have that understanding. Hey, it's because we really need that photo op, or hey, we have a huge donor, or hey, we really had this exciting thing that happened to us. We're a publicly traded company, and we really want people to understand why we're doing this. And so when that why is answered, then we really start breaking it down, going, okay, well, what do we need to do to pull off this event? And from there, various steps along the way, from, basic conversation of indoor, outdoor, location, to who needs to be there and who needs to be represented, not only from your company, but maybe from the community. So, the first question always from my perspective is the why, because if the why can't be answered, then why are we doing it?
Yeah, that's good. And I have similar thoughts when a company comes to us and wants to do a news conference, right? It's like, okay, I'm glad you want to do a news conference, but is it newsworthy enough that media is actually going to show? Is your success of this event dependent on media attending, or is it more of a staged event that you're trying to just say that you had it, recognize some of the people that are there, and that kind of thing. But, as we both know from your experience, that media, can't always make it based on your own timeline. Mm-hmm. And, if you're depending on media to be there, how embarrassed might you be if they just can't come or don't come for whatever reason? Either your event's not newsworthy, or something circumvents and becomes a higher, more newsworthy type event for the media, especially if you're talking about local media.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing about my job is I'm not responsible for media showing up. So that kind of falls on you and your expertise. But it does happen. I mean, there's multiple times in my career where, we're going to have all the local stations show up. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Let's see. And then day of comes, maybe they get one, maybe they get none, to your point, and we capture it for them. And then they utilize that through their PR or communications team to get that information out. But you're absolutely correct. There's always high expectations when sometimes these events are being put together. And from where I come is basically, hey, that's great, but let's take care of the people who need to be recognized. And you think of your nonprofits, groundbreakings, large events like that, where they're receiving, community funds, or the community has pitched in to help raise money for something, or, a YMCA, for example, or any type of nonprofit that's getting built or reestablished or going through some sort of large project. Sometimes the news does come in, but it may not be live. It's just going to be taped. They'll be played at a later time. And so from my experience, sometimes I tell my clients, look, if the media is there, we'll be prepared for them. I'll give them a feed. We'll give them whatever they want. At the end of the day, most of our media events are recorded by my technical team. And so we're able to provide that to our clients so they can do what they need to do at a later date. For the most part, it's recognition of some sort of major milestone they're going through, or major recognition. And it's how we can help them really elevate that experience, one, for the guests that are there, but two, so they can continue their good work that they're doing.
Yeah, that's for sure true. And I'm a big fan of inviting, people within your organization and your vendors, sponsors, donors, et cetera, to fill seats sometimes too. So it looks like, there's plenty of people there for sure. Because, if you're depending on media to fill the room, you better have a pretty good announcement is the example I like to give. So what other accommodations do you think people need to be considering as far as from a technical standpoint for the media? When media arrives, what kind of things do you see them asking for help from you and your organizations for?
So first and foremost, we'll start with audio. So, I tell my clients, unless there's a major news breaking story, as you said, and I don't like getting into like what could cause a major news breaking story. But the one thing you see are the million microphones. The reason you see a million microphones are crowded around a podium is because they don't have a company like us involved. So it's literally every news outlet that is there, or anybody who's trying to get that sound bite is fighting for a spot. And so you get what you see, sadly, and not the most ideal situation, news outlet, or excuse me, a media event where, you know, recorders across a podium or a table, right? And mics just sticking out everywhere. In my line of work, we don't like to do that. We like to keep it clean and professional. So we normally will have a designated microphone with a plaque or something. Again, think of like a presidential person speaking, or something coming from some sort of podium or lectern. So we really control what the image looks like and what the media and people are going to be getting. So they're going to see something that's a little more uniformed and proper. Also, the audio now is being controlled by our technical team, and so, or any technical team that provides my level of services. So we really go out of our way to ensure our clients that they're getting the best level audio for anybody who is going to be coming in to capture those moments. We'll provide press boxes or different elements that can be now done with digital boards, things of that nature. And so the first thing I always ask my clients is, hey, if we're going to go down this road and we're expecting press, these are some things we need to be mindful. Good, clean audio, and then the ability to distribute that in a live environment.
That's interesting, because I would imagine that many companies probably love the idea of having a whole bunch of microphones, so it looks like, you know, they're being covered everywhere. But then I'm sure the those that are broadcasting, you know, some sort of video probably don't love having the logo of all their competitors showing up also. So it's kind of one of those things I've never really thought of before. But you're right. I mean, you've seen them where, you know, there's a dozen microphones up there and it looks a little chaotic, and you've seen the cleaner ones. You know, so I guess there's pros and cons. You know, maybe the client would like the idea of having a bunch of microphones up there because it looks important, but at the same time, for production quality standpoint and probably the favor of the media, you know, they might like their logo being seen, but probably not everybody else's logo. Has that been your experience also?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you know, if you think of the field reporter out there, he's getting his bonus points if his microphone is on the camera shot, especially if other TV station or outlets are picking it up. So, you know, for them, they get the kudos. For me, I hate to say what I'm about to say, Jason, but whenever I see a whole bunch of microphones, I think of crisis communication. And that's really normally when you see that is in a crisis communication. There's no room to get in a production company or professional services to really help communicate what message is being said. It's, hey, everybody, here's what's the word, and you know, everyone's getting it. So when I see something like that, from your point, I understand and I appreciate hearing how you're saying it, you know, hey, it's showing all this. But for me, it's usually like, hey, man, your building just blew up and you're trying to explain to people why it blew up. And I don't normally get called for those type of press conferences.
Right. Well, I mean, I know your company does work nationwide. But you know, if you had the resources nearby, how much notice would you need to get involved in, say, a news conference that was related to crisis or breaking news of some sort? You know, is same day or next day enough time?
Yes. You know, we have helped, again, crisis. I can honestly say I don't get too many phone calls for, and probably for a lot of optic reasons and things like that. But we do get relatively quick turnarounds for big news stories, or maybe big important things that are happening within a corporation or a nonprofit. We have gotten some calls where we've made things happen within 48 hours. As simple as like putting up a stage or getting a little pop-up tent or something a little bit larger to get people under with a simple PA system. Those are usually very quick turnarounds, and we can make those happen within like a 48-hour period.
Okay, awesome. So getting back to just kind of events in general, are there any kind of events that, I mean, it sounds like you've described a variety of events. Are there any kind of events that you just won't do, or just aren't in your wheelhouse, or maybe, you know, just you find that aren't as productive for either the client and your company?
Well, it goes back to that first question, you know, the why are we doing it? Why are we being called in? And I think that's really helps me guide my clients with, you know, okay, what are we trying to do? You know, if optics is important, going back to like a crisis communication scenario or an immediate news release, let's be honest, if someone's got some not great news they're sharing, the last thing you want to see is something that's really well done and polished as they're communicating. You almost start thinking of kind of like the Valdez or something very dramatic like that, where you had all these executives talking from a boardroom and they're not there in the situation where what's going on. So I think we learned those from, my old days in communication classes of watching what people did in the 80s and things like that. And now it's more, hey, we're getting there. We're identifying the problems. We're tackling this on. And so I don't get a lot of those phone calls for optics, but we are involved in a lot of important events. And those are the ones that, we really take a lot of pride in, whether it's being some sort of dedication and an announcement for something, or we were involved here locally in Jacksonville, where we are, with the initiative of really kind of expanding this beautiful walkway over on the west side of town. And, that walkway was going to be going through some areas that needed to be in La Villa redone. We were involved in those press conferences and really community outreach. Some other events that, we've done, pretty much anything, Jason, if the why is there. We were involved, for example, with Duval Public Schools when they were renaming the schools, and they had to have those press conferences or town hall meetings for all those schools. And that was really tough. It was hard work. A lot of emotions were in the room, but, we were called to the task of, hey, making sure that the message was being heard, and that not only from the school board side, but also from the people being, wanting to make sure their voices were heard. And so we were really brought in for that task. And I believe, we were able to do, I think it was 25 town hall meetings throughout several different high schools here in the Duval County area. And, again, it's the why. Why are we being summoned to this call?
Gotcha. Okay. And Alfredo, let's talk more about kind of the questions that you think organizations should be asking themselves, either before they commit to doing an event or before they reach out to a event production or management company like yours.
Well, the first thing is, who are we reaching? So once you understand why we're doing it, who are we really reaching? How many people do we need to be there? And knowing those things in advance before you make the phone calls to companies like mine, because we're just going to ask you. We're going to ask you point blank, okay, how many people are you trying to have at this event? Where are we going to be having the event? Have you considered, if you're doing the event outdoors, for a rain situation or bad weather, since we are planning this out more than maybe 48 hours? And so really kind of having some of those real basic, what we think maybe for granted that we're going to invite 100 people. Well, that's important. 100 people versus 50 people is a whole different setup, just because of comfort and how we're going to, move 50 to 100 people. And so, really asking that. And then from there, how structured are you looking for the event? So, to your point earlier, sometimes it's very simple. We'll be called in for, hey, we need a small stage. We're going to do this outdoors. So we know we need a little small roof, and, we're only going to have a few people there. That it's all we really care about. We really want to make this announcement, or, we received this grant and we really want to thank some local politicians and commissioners or some influencers in our area that, really made this happen. Again, those sound bites, those candid moments, those pictures. And so, really walking through that aspect with our clients and really asking them the questions. Okay, if we go this route, we understand you want to recognize these 30 people, for example. Are we prepared for you knowing that could take an hour, where most media outlets aren't going to give you an hour?
Right.
So, let's scale that back. Let's really keep this to 15 minutes. That's what people want. Those are the sound bites they're looking for. Those are the shots. We can always do something private later or host something different for those recognitions. But for these moments, you really want to be concise. If you're really trying to get the crowds out, if you really are trying to do something spectacular, being mindful. And then a lot of my job also is staging. So, we were involved with the Ronald McDonald House at one point, where we helped them build their beautiful facility that's over here along the river. When we did that groundbreaking, We wanted to make sure that people knew we weren't spending money, and they did a great job of making sure that. We actually brought in excavators and device and machinery that was going to be used to literally level the land. And myself and another colleague, while we were out there doing the site visit, we said, they were talking about trying to get a banner up and, digging a post and going this elaborate way. And I'm going, hey, let's be mindful of what we're doing. You said you wanted to spend every dollar back into the cause you're doing. Why don't we hold the banner off of one of these back holes? And they looked at me, they're like, can we do that? I'm like, why not? And it's a great photo. They got a great little photo op with everybody with a shovel and the hard hat and all these excavators and back holes in the background, like getting ready to do work. And then they had their banner. We hung it right off of one of the devices. And it's those moments that we're able to really help hear our clients, what their cause, what their mission is, and really kind of bring it all full circle for them.
Well, Alfredo, just kind of ballpark for me, how many events would you say your company produces on average in a calendar year? Just ballpark.
We probably do probably about 800 events in a year.
Mm-hmm. So I would say to our listeners and our audience, right, if you could hire a company that's done 800 events in a year, that's probably, I would guess, at least 790 more events than you probably did this year, right? And so why would you not want to engage with an expert company to have them bring their experience, know-how, and ideas that might save you time, money, and ultimately drive home that better first impression for each of the attendees that are attending your event ultimately. But with that said, we're going to pause here, take a quick break, come back on the other side with more On Top of PR.
You're listening to On Top of PR with your host, Jason Mudd. Jason is a trusted advisor to some of America's most admired and fastest growing brands. He is the managing partner at Axia Public Relations, a PR agency that guides news, social, and web strategies for national companies. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to On Top of PR. I'm your host, Jason Mudd from Axia Public Relations, joined by Alfredo Garcia. Alfredo, we were just talking about how, you're producing about 800 events, per month, per year, and how helpful that would be, to our audience to think about hiring a company like yours when they go to do an event. And some of my experience is biased. One of my previous employers I worked at, we produced a ton of events, and I always just felt like it was so much work to produce these events, if I'm being candid. And so when I started my agency, people would ask us to do events. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do events. But, I know good people who do events and people like you. So just kind of getting back to that a little bit, what are some things to consider when you're organizing an event that, based on your experience, you can give some advice to be thinking through?
So when, again, just thinking of things, we've kind of started off with the whys and whos. The next thing that always goes to me is location. Where do we want to host this event? Some locations have access to water and electrical, which obviously you're going to need when doing an event, just like if we're doing this podcast, you got to have access to at least electrical and internet for us. But, it's kind of the same concept. So many of my clients will reach out to us and they want to do something at a shipyard, or they want to do something in a remote location, a construction site, or they want to do something in a park. We get these very fun phone calls sometimes of locations and where they're scouting to want to do it. And you kind of be mindful of those things. I'll be talking to someone and they're like, Alfredo, we want to do this here. We want to keep it simple. Okay, that's great. And then the next thing out of my mouth is, okay, well, where are we going to get power to run everything? And they'll look at me and I'm like, yeah, power, I need power. We're going to have to bring in a generator then. Well, won't that set us back? Well, I need power. I don't run on batteries. And so, it's having those conversations. And then, sometimes things do pivot. And sometimes people are like, no, this is important for us. This is where we're doing the work. We've had clients take us into the wilderness, literally the wilderness, wow. Where there's trees and all kinds of stuff. And it was important for them. It's always important. And that's why, I'll go wherever they need me to go to do an event. But, you have to be mindful of all those aspects. This one client that took us into the wilderness, the first thing when we got to the job site is I told them, I go, look, you're going to invite people, right? And they're like, yeah, we were going to invite people. And I'm like, okay, it's a weekday, right? And they're like, yeah, it's a weekday. How are your guests going to come from the road and traverse over these 100 feet we just walked over with mud holes and everything else? We're going to have to put a boardwalk. We're going to have to put plywood at a least. I mean, if people are coming during the work week, they're going to be coming from work. And so, oh, we didn't think about that. Well, that's why we're here. So, we try to become an extension of what our clients are trying to do. I'm not an expert. I've just been doing it, as you said, so much that we've encountered all kinds of things. We're thinking of things that people just don't think about. They think about the end game. They think about, the why, and those are important. Those purpose-driven reasons is what drives all of us to accomplish the goal. But, for us, what I do, it's kind of more practical. So I'll sit there and I'll go, okay, well, this is what I've done, and we can provide that advice. Or, hey, have you considered maybe not taking away from what we're doing here and still doing it in the forest or the woods, but maybe we bring people in this way, or try something like this and help elevate that experience. Because for me, and for our company, it's really about the experience, not only that our clients are having, but really the message that they're going to be trying to drive home, to the people that are attending these events.
Right. Absolutely. So let's talk about budgeting and what are thoughts and questions that should be asked as companies are starting and organizations are starting to look at budgets.
Budgets are tough. I get it. It's hard sometimes raising the money. And then when you're raising the money for a cause, not so much for maybe the media event that needs to take place to support or maybe even help raise money. So, I really challenge my clients in this area here. And yes, sadly, any company that you reach out to is going to ask you the same question. What's your budget? I tell my clients, don't say no budget. It's the worst thing you can say, or I have no clue what the budget is. We all have a clue. No one buys a car without knowing, hey, that car is going to cost maybe $10,000. Or, hey, if I go to the wrong lot, it's going to cost me more than that. You have to have a number. And when engaging a company like me, even if the number's low, but it's a real number you're holding to, and a low number for us in my industry, it's $2,500. That's low. That you're getting a PA system and a competent individual, maybe a small stage, and you kind of what I call bare bones. You got the essence of what is necessary to get a message out and clearly. From there, you can elaborate. I mean, right? We could go LED walls. You can go full-fledged tent. You could have, people passing hors d'oeuvres or having refreshments or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It could go from there. For me, it's just knowing that number. Any company, any nonprofit, any organization, any firm, when you call a company like myself and you just say, I have no clue, at that point, I'm not giving you all my resources. I'm not going to spend hours of my time with someone who may not really know what is necessary to put this on. We all have basic ideas, or at least of what we're allowed to spend or try to spend. It's only going to help our clients, right? My goal is to help you solve this problem and how to make it work. That's what I want to do. That is what I've been wanting to do for 20 years, is help people pull these type of events off. And my team, as well as any of my competitors out there or in the marketplace all around the country, we're going to start in those areas. And just having that knowledge is really going to prepare you for a better conversation.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we have the same thing on our end. It's like you wouldn't go to a real estate agent and say, "Oh, I'm looking for a house." Well, how much do you have to spend? I have no idea. You wouldn't go to a real estate agent and ask them, "Hey, I'm looking for a house," and they say, "Well, how many bedrooms do you need?" I have no idea. Right? You've at least thought some of these things through, and certainly you don't go to real estate agents and say, I want to buy a house. Say, okay, well, what side of town or what city? And they're like, I don't know. So there is some thoughts. Now I get it. Like I've you may have never done an event before, and I don't want to just throw out $50,000 because I feel like you might, take advantage of me. But at the same time, as you know, and I'm sure you've done events that are easily $50,000, right? So it just depends on the experience that you're trying to create. And like you said, why are we doing this event? What's the outcomes that we're trying to get? And that should kind of pepper in a lot of it. But there's a lot of things people don't think of, like, okay, are we serving food? Is it a sit down event? Is it a stand down event, stand up event? Is it indoor, outdoor? Is there going to be additional entertainment and things like that? So, maybe is there kind of like a cheat sheet or a series of additional questions you'd recommend, Alfredo?
I wouldn't say a cheat sheet because every event is unique, but there are a lot of the guiding principles that are the same. Starting off with your location, knowing your location. If your team or organization has decided, okay, hey, we're going to host this event in this location, well, know what the location kind of has. If you go with the example I used a moment ago out in the woods, okay, we know we got to bring everything in. So be prepared. I tell people in our industry, it's not the product. It's not the camera. It's not the tent. It's not the projector screen, microphone. Sadly, those are commodities in my industry. I mean, you can find people that can provide you that equipment. Now, whether it works as well as the other guy, that's going to be dependent on where the person you're talking to. Right. But I say those basic commodities because they can be found. You can find someone to provide you a stage. You can find someone to provide you that tent once you know what you're looking for. It's really then the people. And my biggest asset that I have in my company are the people that work for me, from the managers that help work with my clients, all the way through the whole planning process, to the technicians and the setup crew that are out there building it, setting it up, to the guys then running and actually pushing the buttons. That is the expense. And people sometimes take that for granted, and I go, no, this is a skilled job. This is not just some college kid or someone out there just pushing buttons. Yeah. Again, it's a profession. And just like in the PR world, just like all of us, we hold to our profession. These people that work for me, and myself included, it is a profession. It is a job. It is a career. And so, letting people know that, these gentlemen and women that actually run the audio visual for my company, but as well as other companies or news outlets, it's all the same skill set. And that's what it is. They'll spend their entire lives running this equipment and make a good living out there, depending on what market and places they live and work for. But, sometimes I think that's the number one hurdle I have to get people to realize is, hey, it's the people. It's not that projector and screen. Yeah, an LED wall does cost money because it's new technology, but it's the people. And I think that's sometimes the hardest thing in my line of work that I have to get people to understand is when talking budgets. It's that.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it comes back to, doing almost 1,000 events a year. You're going to have people who have seen this happen literally 1,000 times before. And so they know how to fix it or how to turn it around quickly or whatever, versus, asking your marketing coordinator to figure out how to start plugging in audio visuals and speakers and where to lay them out and place them and how to hide them and disguise them. So, I can definitely appreciate, what you're describing in that regard.
Yeah, no, the ones I feel for nowadays, it's funny you mentioned marketing. I can honestly tell you I've seen the shift, Jason. 10 years ago, it was the marketing coordinators and the people in the communications department out there running cables or doing stuff internally for corporate companies. That has now moved to the IT department. Yeah.
Well, last time I had an IT person design something that was, easy for people to use and enjoy, it didn't go very well. So yeah, I hear you on that. Well, Alfredo, if somebody's interested in connecting with you, they want to talk about an event or something like that, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Email is the best way to get a hold of me. I tell people as soon as we close the door of one event, we're opening the doors to start setting up another one. So to your point, we do about 850 events a year. There's a lot of traveling in between there. There's a lot of setups and teardowns. So emails are always the best way. I do check them all the time, and I do respond and pride myself for responding to those emails. Cell phones can always be challenging because if you're in an environment where there's just not good cell reception, which is about 90% of the time. The cell phones sometimes aren't always the best. And I think, Jason, you've called me in a few ballroom setups before.
Yeah. So tell me, you're active on LinkedIn. Is LinkedIn a good place to get connected with you as well?
Yes, I do have LinkedIn tied to my email, so that is always a great way to reach out to me. Our website is also a great tool as well, because the nice thing about our website, it's just not me. I have a marketing team that supports me there as well.
All right, well, throw out your website and then we'll wrap up the episode.
Well, thank you. Well, you can always find us at www.ssav.net. And Jason, I appreciate being here with you and your listeners.
Yeah, well, we're glad you came on, and I think all of our audience will learn something from this episode they can turn around and apply in their own organization. And certainly as we're headed into the holidays and people are thinking about company parties and any end of the year or new year announcements, maybe new product launches and things like that, or hopefully maybe a worthy organization receiving a big check, that they will think of you and this conversation today as kind of a reminder to, do what you do best and outsource the rest, as Bill Gates said, because you always want to make a good first impression by hiring outside trusted experts, whether that's for PR or whether that's for running an event, right? So anyway, Alfredo, it's been great. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. If you found value in this episode today, I hope you will share this episode with a friend or coworker so they can benefit from it as well. And if you love On Top of PR, you're already a subscriber, do us a favor and drop us a 5-star review of our show. You can find how to do that in our episode notes from this episode. And speaking of episode notes, we will put a link to help you access the resources we mentioned during the show, and more specifically, how to get a hold of Alfredo. I'm sure he's such a nice guy and a good guy. He would be happy to answer any questions you might have. But with that, this is Jason Mudd signing off. Hope something great happens to you today.
This has been On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by ReviewMaxer. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and check out past shows at ontopofpr.com.